Hey everyone, tonight we're traveling back in time, way back. A world of muddy fields, clanging swords, and slightly questionable hygiene. We're diving into what life was really like on a medieval battlefield. Forget the movies with shiny armor and heroic knights. The truth? You probably wouldn't survive a single day without learning some serious tricks. So before you get comfy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you actually enjoy this. And drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always wild to see the battlefield from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, ambient background hum, and let's step onto the field together. Imagine churned up mud underfoot, the clash of metal, war cries echoing, and horses skidding through the chaos. Congratulations, you've just woken up on a medieval battlefield. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Life is brutal, unpredictable, and full of tiny dangers lurking around every corner. But don't worry, we'll explore it all. The sights, sounds, smells, and stories that made surviving even a few hours an epic challenge. The first light of dawn creeps over the hills like it's trying not to wake anyone. Mist rolls over the grass and trees, clinging to everything like a damp blanket. The air smells fresh, kind of like wet earth. But there's also that tiny hint of something else. Smoke from last night's fires, horses, and maybe a little fear. Yep, fear has a smell. You'll notice it if you're standing here, waiting for the world to explode into chaos. Soldiers start stirring. Some groan and roll over. Others sit up, stretch stiff arms, and mutter half-awake curses at the cold. Their armor clinks like it's complaining, because chainmail is basically a fancy metal onesie that you never take off. Some helmets get stuck. Someone probably yells, "Oi, get your helmet off your ear." Or maybe it's just a curse that echoes across the foggy hills. Either way, it's the first sound of life, and it's already a little chaotic. Weapons need attention. Swords are sharpened, but probably not enough to impress anyone. Shields get straps adjusted, because nothing ruins your morning like a shield that slips when you swing at an arrow. Spears are straightened, and arrows are counted. Honestly, most of these guys have no idea how many arrows they'll really need, but counting makes them feel like they do. Some are practicing swings, and yeah, some probably hit each other in the arm or a leg by accident. Nothing like a little friendly morning injury to start your day, right? The soldiers murmur prayers, mostly to gods they hope exist, sometimes just muttering to themselves, and sometimes it's a full-on whispered pep talk. Please, don't let today be the day I get impaled by a sword. That's a pretty popular one. Some shakeout extra nerves by mumbling, "If I survive this, I'll never complain about peas again." Which, let's be honest, is like saying, "If I survive a tornado, I'll never complain about traffic." Survival is motivating. The quiet right now is weird. It's not just silence. It's a calm that makes your ears pay attention. You hear little things that you won't notice once the battle starts. A distant crow, a horse stamping its hoof, a soldier sneezing behind shield. Some guy scratches his armor in a way that makes a metallic squeak, and you notice it all. You're hyper-aware because if you miss the sound of an approaching horse or the sudden clatter of a dropped sword, that could be your last mistake. Fog hides the hills, but you can guess what's out there. Enemy soldiers probably wake up with the same mix of dread and excitement. Maybe they're doing the same thing, stretching, grumbling, sharpening weapons, whispering prayers, hoping their armor doesn't give them blisters today. Both sides are just tiny human things in a giant, muddy, foggy field. It's funny when you think about it. Two armies, all worried about blisters and breakfast, about to meet, and suddenly life gets a lot louder. You can almost hear the field holding its breath. That first touch of sunlight on the grass, the fog slowly moving, It all feels like the world is paused. And you know it's lying. Everything is about to go nuts, but right now it's calm, almost peaceful. And if you take a deep breath, you can almost pretend you're on a hike, not about a fight for your life. Almost. Campfires from the night before still smolder. A few smoke tendrils drift through the air, smelling like old wood, ash, and a hint of meat that someone tried to cook. It's barely edible, but it's the first breakfast some of these guys will have in a while. Some soldiers are sneaking bites, try not to look like they're weak, while others just groan and try to focus on tying their boots properly. Battle boots are tricky, and yes, that's a thing. The landscape is quiet, except for the occasional sound of a distant horn. Not the battle horn yet, just a warning or maybe someone practicing. It echoes across the hills in a way that makes your chest tighten a little. It's like the land itself is saying, hey, pay attention. Something is coming. And you do. Your nerves are buzzing. Your stomach is flipping. You're not sure if it's fear, excitement, or hunger. Probably a mix of all three. Some soldiers are stretching, shaking out muscles that haven't moved properly in months. And honestly, some of them overdo it. One guy tries a fancy twist and falls flat on his face. Everyone laughs quietly, even though they shouldn't. Laughter right now is dangerous. It's a little reminder that humans are humans, even when death is literally minutes away. Someone whispers, "Better that it's you than me," and they all laugh again. It's weirdly comforting. The commanders ride along the ranks, checking armor, giving a few words that are supposed to sound inspiring. Remember your honor, or a fight like men. Yeah, that'll help. Some soldiers nod, others just stare into the fog, pretending they're ready. The truth? Nobody's really ready. You can swing a sword perfectly, but when you hear the first scream and smell blood, that's when panic decides if you survive. And right now, it hasn't started. So, for a moment, you breathe. You stretch. You prepare. Animals notice the tension too. Horses shift, ears twitching, tails swishing nervously. Dogs bark somewhere in the distance. Maybe a crow lands on a branch, watching everything like it knows exactly what's about to happen. The world is alive, just before chaos. You notice it if you stop, really listen. The birds, the wind, the clatter of metal, the whispers of soldiers. All tiny things that matter. Some soldiers are pacing. It's like they're trying to walk out the fear, but mostly it just makes the ground muddy and their boots squeak. They mutter, "This will be fine, won't it?" The answer is probably no, but no one says that out loud. You have to pretend confidence. It's part of survival. Confidence, or at least pretending to have it, can save your life when panic spreads like wildfire. The smell of wet earth, smoke, sweat, and horses mixes in the cool morning air. You take it in because, honestly, it might be the last chance you get to appreciate it. Once battle starts, everything smells like blood, dust, and fear. Right now, it's almost tolerable, almost peaceful. And then, maybe someone drops a helmet. It clatters. Heads snap. Someone mutters a curse. Everyone flinches, realizing how fragile this calm really is. It's a small sound, but it reminds you, nothing is truly safe here. Not a single thing. Not even the quiet. So you stand there. You watch. You breathe. You notice every little thing. The sunlight creeping over the hills. The mist drifting. Soldiers stretching, whispering, laughing nervously. Horses pawing the ground. A crow calling somewhere off in the distance. That's your world right now. Tiny, fragile, human. And in a few minutes, everything will change. The calm will vanish. The world will get loud, fast, and messy. But for now, you're alive. You're noticing. You're soaking in the last moments before everything goes to chaos. And that, my friend, is the first lesson of the battlefield. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about noticing the little things. It's about paying attention to every sound, every smell, every twitch of muscle. Because once the battle starts, your world will shrink to a few feet around you, and missing one tiny detail could be the difference between life and death. So take a deep breath, feel the cool morning air on your face, listen to the faint noises of a waking world, and maybe, just maybe appreciate this quiet while you still can. Because dawn doesn't last, and neither does calm on a medieval battlefield. Strapping on armor in the morning is like trying to put on a metal onesie designed to make life slightly worse. The chainmail is heavy, itchy, and constantly digging into your skin. Every ring catches something. A scratch, a loose thread, maybe even a stray leaf. And suddenly you're wondering why anyone thought this was a good idea. You twist, you grunt, you curse under your breath, and somehow it still manages to pinch in all the wrong places. Leather straps tighten, buckles click, and the process is slow. Every piece has a purpose, of course. A helmet protects your skull, a breastplate shields your chest, greaves guard your shins. But none of it is comfortable. Helmets restrict vision, tunnel your sight to the world directly in front of you. Peripheral vision? Forget about it. Hearing? Muffled. Someone shouts, incoming, and it sounds like a whale singing through a tin can. Communication becomes almost impossible, and yet you're expected to move, fight, and think. Swords are heavy too, but not in a nice, workout kind of way. Holding one for the first time feels like hugging a tree branch that wants to cut you in half. Balancing it, swinging it, and keeping your fingers intact is tricky business. One wrong movement, one slip, and your sword either falls out of your hand, sticks in the mud, or, worst case scenario, pokes you somewhere you really don't want it to. Some warriors joke about it. Some scream. Some just accept it as fate. Shields are awkward, but essential. Big, clunky, and heavy. They're designed to save your life by taking hits that would otherwise ruin your day, or end it entirely. But moving with a shield is like carrying a door while running through a narrow hallway filled with angry people. You bump shoulders, trip over feet, and sometimes your own shield clips your neighbor, which causes arguments, curses, and maybe a punch. Still, when arrows start flying, that awkward metal slab suddenly feels like the best friend you never wanted. Picking the right weapon is a gamble. Some prefer swords, good for slashing, decent for stabbing, but tiring to swing for hours. Axes, brutal, powerful, and perfect for making an enemy regret existing, but slow and clumsy. Spears give distance, but misjudge your step, and you're the one impaled by your own pointy stick. And don't get me started on maces. Heavy, dangerous, and about as graceful as a drunk ox on roller skates. Every choice has consequences, and mistakes with weapons are often fatal. One tiny miscalculation, one poorly timed swing, and suddenly your life ends because of a split-second error. Blades need care, of course. Swords get sharpened, edges tested, and sometimes polished. Mostly so you can look intimidating, because let's be real, polish won't save you from a well-aimed spear. Sharpening takes skill, patience, and attention. Too dull, and your swing bounces off armor. Too sharp, and you risk cutting yourself while trying to fight. Arrows get checked, fletching examined, and bowstrings tightened. All these small details could mean the difference between walking away and becoming fertilizer for the battlefield. Mistakes are everywhere. Armor gets strapped wrong. A helmet slides down mid-fight, blocking your sight. A gauntlet strap breaks, letting your hand move in a way it shouldn't. You swing your sword, forget your footing, and stumble, only to have the enemy see an opening you didn't know you'd created. Weapons are precise tools, but in the chaos of battle, precision is more of a suggestion than a rule. One slip, one misstep, and you're toast. Literally, sometimes. The sound of metal clanging fills the air even before the battle begins. Swords tapping against shields, armor scraping against chainmail, helmets bumping as soldiers check alignment. It's loud enough to make your ears ring a little, and the fog of early morning makes it echo strangely across the field. It's kind of beautiful if you step back and ignore the fact that all of this is about to kill someone. Training helps a little, but not much. You can practice swings, blocks, and stances for years, but nothing really prepares you for the real thing. When an enemy charges, your sword feels heavier, your shield feels clumsier, and your helmet suddenly seems like it's cutting off all sense of the world. Adrenaline is supposed to help, but it mostly just makes your muscles twitch at the wrong time, and your brain scream, "What are you doing?" There's an art to using armor and weapons, though. Soldiers who survive learn how to move, pivot, and swing without tripping themselves. They know how to angle a shield to deflect blows, how to swing a sword without letting fatigue set in, how to duck, weave, and protect vital areas. It takes years, or luck, or both. The problem is, on a medieval battlefield, the odds aren't in your favor. You might have practiced for years, but the world doesn't care. Mistakes are amplified, small slips are fatal, and the noise, the mud, the chaos, it's overwhelming. Weapons and armor aren't just tools. They're an extension of your body, but they have personalities. A sword can be awkward, a shield stubborn, armor heavy. You learn to work with them, sometimes fight against them, and occasionally just accept that they're going to make life miserable. You develop a rhythm, a flow, but it's fragile. One misstep and the rhythm collapses, taking you with it. Don't forget fatigue. Moving in full armor is exhausting. Carrying a sword and shield, marching across a field, jumping over obstacles, ducking attacks. It's like trying to run a marathon wearing a metal costume. Your legs ache, your back screams, and your arms feel like jelly after a while. And yet, there's no pause button, no rest until the battle ends. Every swing, every step, every parry eats your energy. By the time the real fighting starts, you're already tired, already vulnerable. Then there's the mental part. Helmets block your sight and muffle sounds, which makes thinking strategically harder. You can't hear subtle cues, you can't see what's happening on your sides, and the fog or dust makes everything blurry. You need to guess what's coming, react fast, and hope your instincts are right. Your training will help, but instinct can betray you. That's when mistakes become fatal. And let's not forget the humor. Yes, even here. Soldiers trip over their own armor, get stuck in mud while holding a spear, or accidentally smack a comrade with a shield. It's tragic, but a little humor is everywhere. You laugh to stay sane, even if the laughter is more nervous than happy. It's a survival mechanism. If you lose your mind before the battle even starts, your body probably won't last long either. So, the armor and weapons that promise protection also make life harder. They're heavy, restrictive, awkward, and unforgiving. They require skill, strength, endurance, and sometimes a little luck. They can save your life, or make your death slower and more painful. Every strap, buckle, and swing matters. One tiny mistake, one loose strap, one misjudged swing, and you might not survive another hour. By the time you finish strapping in, adjusting, and testing every piece, you've already learned something important. Surviving on a medieval battlefield isn't just about having the right equipment. It's about knowing how to live with that equipment, anticipating the chaos, and being ready for mistakes. Yours and everyone else's. And even then, you're not guaranteed to make it. So take a moment, feel the weight of your armor, swing your sword a few times, test your shield. Notice the strain in your muscles, the limited vision, the awkwardness. Understand that every step, every swing, every breath you take in this heavy, clumsy suit of death is practice for what's coming. It's uncomfortable. It's exhausting. It's terrifying. But it's necessary. Because when the sun fully rises and the battle begins, the armor and weapons are the only things standing between you and, well, let's just say you don't want to think about it too much. And that's chapter 2. You're armored up, weapon in hand, ready, or as ready as anyone can be, to face the chaos of a medieval battlefield. Mistakes will happen, comfort will be non-existent, and yet somehow, life will continue for those who survive. Once you're strapped in armor and wielding your weapons, it's time to march. Sounds simple, right? Not so fast. A medieval battlefield isn't a gym, it's not a parade, and it's definitely not a place for casual strolls. It's uneven ground, mud, rocks, streams, and 1,000 tiny obstacles that love to trip you up. Marching in full armor feels like trying to run in a refrigerator. Everything is heavy, awkward, and screaming. Why are we doing this again? The unit lines up. Soldiers check each other's equipment, adjust straps, and occasionally grumble about someone snoring through armor adjustment. The sergeant, or whatever scary person is in charge, shouts orders, and everyone tries to look alert while secretly praying they won't step on a rock and faceplant. If you're lucky, the path is flat. If you're not, you're hiking uphill while carrying enough metal to weigh down a small horse. And yes, the mud loves to swallow boots whole, so every step is an adventure in balance. Civilians sometimes watch from a distance, peeking out from villages or forest edges. They don't get it. They don't understand why people voluntarily strap on metal suits to march into the unknown, but you do it anyway. Pride, duty, or sheer stubbornness, call it what you want. Everyone has a reason. Some think about glory, some think about pay, some think, maybe I'll survive if I keep my head down and hope the guy next to me trips first. Conversations during the march are limited. Armor restricts speech, shields block gestures, and the collective grunt of marching creates a low, constant noise. You might whisper to your neighbor, but the effort usually isn't worth it. Instead, you focus on putting one foot in front of the other, dodging puddles, avoiding mud pits, and try not to smother your face with a chainmail coif. Your muscles burn, sweat drips, and your joints protest. Every step reminds you that survival requires stamina, patience, and a weird sense of humor about the ridiculousness of marching in death traps made of iron. Animals add chaos too. Horses are supposed to help, but they're unpredictable. One spooks at a crow, another refuses to move uphill, a third decides mud is an obstacle worthy of a tantrum. Foot soldiers try to maneuver around hooves, ducking or hopping aside, all while hoping they don't end up flat on the ground. Dogs, if they're present, are mostly useless, running underfoot, barking, and occasionally tripping someone. The battlefield is a symphony of confusion before any sword is even drawn. Food is another challenge. Marching soldiers can't really carry much. Maybe a bit of bread, salted meat, or dried fruit stuffed in a pouch. It's not enough to keep energy high, but it's something. You chew while walking, praying no one gets hit in the process, and mostly realizing that medieval rations are bland, crumbly, and oddly motivating in a survive or starve kind of way. Water, when you can find it, is a relief, but carrying enough for a long march is a logistical nightmare. One wrong step and your water jar tips over in the mud, leaving you parched and sad. Terrain isn't always your friend. Fields of uneven dirt, forests, hills, or rivers make marching a constant challenge. You have to look down to avoid rocks, roots, and holes, but looking down too much can get you hit by a flying branch, or worse, an enemy arrow if the battle starts early. Hills are the worst. Gravity loves metal-clad soldiers, and climbing one is exhausting. By the time you reach the top, you're sweating, out of breath, and already regretting every life choice that led you here. Weather loves to make things harder. Rain turns everything into a slippery, treacherous mess. Sun turns metal into a furnace. Wind cuts through armor like it's whispering. You'll be miserable today. Cold mornings make fingers numb and stiff, which is dangerous when you need to grip a sword or shield. Sweat collects under chainmail, making it feel like someone is slowly roasting you alive. Regardless of the season, marching is a test of endurance, and the elements are never kind. The mental game is just as tough as the physical. You know what's coming, the battle ahead, the chaos, the screaming, the possibility of death, but you can't dwell too much. Panic slows you down, distracts you, and makes mistakes more likely. Instead, soldiers find small ways to cope. Joking quietly with a neighbor, humming a tune, or imagining the absurdity of marching in full metal armor like it's some kind of extreme cosplay. Humor is armor in its own right, even if it doesn't protect from a sword. Marching in formation is another layer of difficulty. You're supposed to stay in line, keep pace, and follow orders, but metal armor restricts movement, shields block peripheral vision, and fatigue sets in fast. Everyone is trying to maintain discipline while also trying not to fall, trip someone else, or get stuck in a mud pit. Leaders shout, you grunt, and somehow the formation remains mostly intact. Mostly. It's a fragile dance of coordination, patience, and luck. Sometimes, you get to take a moment to observe. Look around at the army stretching behind you. Rows of armor glinting in the sun, banners flapping in the wind, horses snorting, and soldiers muttering. It's a strange mix of terrifying and beautiful. A field of disciplined chaos, all marching towards something none of you can fully control. The camaraderie is real, though. Even if everyone is miserable, even if everyone smells terrible, there's a sense of shared struggle. Surviving the march together is the first small victory. Of course, not everyone makes it comfortably. Someone trips, someone drops a weapon, someone collapses from exhaustion. Medics or fellow soldiers help when they can, but there's little room for pity. The march is merciless, and it weeds out those who aren't prepared, or those who had the misfortune of a bad step. The physical reality is harsh. Long hours, heavy armor, and rough terrain separate the serious from the lucky. Then there's anticipation. Every step brings you closer to the battlefield, closer to the chaos, the screams, the smell of blood, the clash of steel. The march is a slow drumbeat of anxiety. Your heart races, your mind spins scenarios, and your body just tries to keep moving. By the time the first enemy is spotted on the horizon, your muscles are sore, your mind is tense, and your nerves are on edge, but your body has learned to move even under weight and discomfort. And humor still sneaks in. Someone trips over their own shield. A horse farts in the middle of formation. Mud splashes onto the unlucky. Someone complains loudly about the ridiculous armor, while everyone silently agrees. These moments keep sanity intact, and sometimes laughter is the only thing that gets you through another hour. By the end of the march, you've learned something crucial. Survival isn't just about fighting skills. It's about endurance, patience, coordination, and a little bit of luck. Armor and weapons are one thing, but marching in them is another kind of challenge altogether. The battlefield doesn't care if your legs ache, your back hurts, or you wish someone would invent elevators. You keep moving because the alternative isn't pretty. So, as the army approaches the field, imagine the weight on your shoulders, the ache in your legs, the sweat dripping into your eyes. Hear the clatter of armor, the snort of horses, the low murmur of thousands of soldiers, all doing the same miserable, exhausting thing. This is the march to battle. It's grueling, chaotic, uncomfortable, and terrifying, but it's also the first step towards surviving, or not, on a medieval battlefield. And that's chapter 3. You've made it this far. Your body is sore, your nerves are tense, and the battle horizon looms. The march has tested you, prepared you, and reminded you that every step is both a struggle and a small victory. The march ends, and suddenly the battlefield is in front of you. It's not a flat, neat field from a storybook. It's uneven ground littered with mud, rocks, broken carts, and maybe a stray helmet from an unlucky scout. The air smells of sweat, dust, and anxiety. Every soldier tightens their grip on their weapon, adjusts armor straps, and takes a deep breath. You can hear the murmurs of the men and women around you, some whispering prayers, others muttering complaints about the weight of chainmail. The tension is thick enough to cut with a sword, or maybe just a really sharp stick. Then you see them, the enemy, rows of people staring back at you, equally nervous, equally armed, equally heavy in metal. Their banners flap in the wind, their horses paw the ground, and you get that instant, oh no, this is real feeling. It's not a movie. There's no slow motion hero moment. There's just the reality of thousands of people about to hurt each other, and you're right in the middle. The first clash is chaos incarnate. Orders are shouted, horns blare, and suddenly the calm you've been clinging to is gone. Shields collide, swords swing, arrows whistle through the air. The sound is deafening, metal ringing against metal, cries of pain, horses snorting, and the occasional oops when someone trips into the fray. You quickly realize that coordination is often optional. Panic, instinct, and brute force take the lead. If you're unlucky, the first clash hits you hard. Someone swings a sword too close, and you duck just in time, or maybe not in time. A shield bashes into your side, the wind knocked out of you, mud splashing into your face. You taste iron, dirt, and maybe a little bit of fear. Every movement is a gamble. A wrong step, a misjudged swing, or a momentary distraction can mean serious injury, or worse. Horses are the real, unpredictable element. They're supposed to be controlled, trained, and obedient, but in the heat of the first clash, they're like caffeinated toddlers. Hooves kick, horses rear, riders lose balance. You duck, dodge, and pray they don't turn your head into a dented souvenir. Cavalry charges are terrifying for good reason. One horse moving fast in full metal armor can send several people flying if you're in its path. And there's nothing polite about it. Survival requires sharp eyes and fast reflexes. Arrows are another story. They're silent, sneaky, and often come from higher ground. 1 second you're observing the enemy, the next you're diving behind a makeshift barrier or a fallen comrade. Quivers empty fast, and dodging arrows feels less like skill and more like luck mixed with terror. Sometimes you don't even know what hit you until it's too late. The first clash is a brutal teacher. Awareness, timing, and instinct are your only friends. Communication breaks down. You can't hear your comrades over the noise, and shouting doesn't really work when helmets block your ears. Gestures are misread, signals ignored, and everyone's focus is on surviving their immediate vicinity. You might try to call out instructions, but it's a lost cause. The battlefield is an orchestra of confusion, each person playing their own frantic tune while somehow, just barely, maintaining enough order to not completely collapse. Injuries happen fast. Someone trips on a root, someone else gets sliced on the arm, and blood mixes with mud in ways that are both terrifying and oddly artistic if you ignore the panic. The first clash is merciless. It separates the prepared from the unprepared in seconds. Armor helps, but it's heavy, it restricts movement, and it doesn't cover everything. Even a small scratch can sting like crazy, and a big hit can end your day, or your life, instantly. And humor, well, it sneaks in strange ways. Maybe someone's helmet falls off mid-swing, revealing a very confused face, or a horse runs through a puddle, splashing mud on everyone in sight. It's hard to laugh when someone's swinging a sword near your head, but brief moments of absurdity, like a mud-caked soldier slipping and sliding away from danger, remind you that life continues, even in the chaos. Laughter is rare, but it's a coping mechanism. The first clash also teaches you something crucial. Don't get tunnel vision. Looking too closely at one enemy, one threat, or one problem is a mistake. Battles are multi-directional nightmares. Arrows fly from above, spears thrust from the side, and horses charge unpredictably. You need eyes in the back of your head, quick reflexes, and nerves of steel, or at least the willingness to flail wildly and hope it works. Noise is sensory overload. Screams, shouts, clanging metal, hooves, and the occasional crash of collapsing structures create a constant assault on your ears. It's exhausting. You realize quickly that silence was a blessing you'll never get back. Your brain tries to process, but instinct takes over. Training only goes so far. After a while, you're reacting, not thinking. Fatigue sets in fast. Even if the first clash lasts only a few minutes, moving, swinging, blocking, and ducking in armor is exhausting. By the time the first real pause comes, your muscles ache, sweat soaks your clothing, and your heart pounds like a drum. And that's just the first few minutes of actual fighting. The battlefield is relentless, and you realize survival is more than skill. It's stamina, strategy, and a lot of luck. The first clash ends, but the battlefield doesn't. Bodies are strewn, some screaming, some silent. Blood and mud mix, creating a grim reminder that this is real. You take stock. Armor is dented, weapons dulled, nerves frayed. And yet, somehow, you're still alive. For now, it's a small victory in the grand chaos, a proof that maybe, just maybe, you can last a little longer. At this point, you also notice patterns. Soldiers tend to bunch together for safety. Archers find high ground, and cavalry searches for weak spots. It's brutal, messy, and violent, but there's a strange rhythm if you look closely. Survival is about finding your rhythm within the chaos, moving with it, and avoiding predictable mistakes. The first clash is both terrifying and educational in the harshest way possible. And remember, the first clash is only the beginning. It's a taste of what's to come, a reminder that battle doesn't wait for anyone. It's loud, confusing, brutal, and exhausting. But it's also a glimpse into the reality of medieval warfare. You're learning quickly that survival isn't just about strength. It's about awareness, adaptability, and maybe a touch of humor when you slip in the mud or a helmet knocks you in the face. By the end of the first clash, your heart is racing, your body is screaming, and the horizon is filled with more soldiers ready to join the fray. You've seen what chaos looks like up close. You've felt the weight of steel, the sting of mud and sweat, and the sudden, sharp reminder that this is life or death. And yet, somehow, you're still standing, still breathing, still part of this living, moving nightmare we call a medieval battlefield. After the chaos of the first clash, surviving a medieval battlefield doesn't just mean swinging a sword, it means living in the camp. And let me tell you, camp life is a whole different kind of challenge. You think the battle is tough? Try sleeping on dirt, eating questionable stew, and dodging your comrades' farts while your armor slowly rusts. Welcome to life behind the front lines. The camp is organized chaos. Tents are pitched close together, ropes sagging, canvas flapping in the wind. Soldiers move between them carrying water, food, or weapons. Everything smells like mud, sweat, smoke, and animals. Horses are tethered nearby, stamping impatiently, sometimes peeing wherever they like. Dogs roam freely, sniffing everything, barking at shadows, and generally causing minor panic. You think a battlefield will be dangerous, but the camp teaches you that surviving your own side can be equally challenging. Food is questionable. Breakfast might be hard bread, stale cheese, or porridge so thick it could double as armor. Sometimes there's meat, sometimes there's not. Salt is a luxury, butter is rare, and wine is rationed. You might see a soldier gnawing on a chunk of jerky with determination, while another quietly wishes he could just trade it for a shiny apple. Cooking is slow and chaotic. Pots clatter over open fires. Smoke makes everyone cough, and occasionally someone forgets to stir, leaving a char disaster that somehow still counts as dinner. It's not Michelin star cuisine, but keeps you alive. Cleanliness is mostly optional. Everyone is tired, muddy, and sore. Baths are rare, and water is precious. Soldiers might splash their faces or scrub their hands, but most of the time it's just deal with it. Clothes smell, armor smells, boots smell, and if you thought the battlefield smelled bad, camp smells worse. You start to realize that medieval hygiene was flexible, to say the least. It's part of survival, but also a test of endurance for your nose. Sleep is another challenge. Tents are crowded, beds are non-existent, and the ground is cold or lumpy. You try to curl up on a blanket, hoping for a few hours of rest before the next day. But there's always someone snoring like a war horn, a horse stomping outside, or the occasional argument over who gets the last dry spot. You quickly learn that naps are more realistic than long sleep, and that keeping your armor close is a necessity, even while trying to dream of anything less chaotic than your life. Camp life is also about preparation. Weapons need cleaning, armor needs oiling, shields need checking. Someone is always sharpening swords, fixing straps, or tying armor plates together with rough rope. A dull sword isn't just annoying, it's a liability. A loose strap on your helmet can mean the difference between life and a quick trip to the afterlife. Every small task matters. It's tedious, it's tiring, but it's essential if you want to survive. The social aspect is interesting. Soldiers form small groups, bond over shared misery, and sometimes argue over the smallest things. Who gets the cleanest blanket? Who forgot to fetch water? Who's hogging the fire? Friendships are forged in mud and exhaustion. Jokes are shared over the stink of stew, and rivalries flare over who's better at carrying a pack. Humor is your secret weapon. Without it, the camp would be unbearable. Laughter sneaks in during ridiculous moments, like someone dropping a helmet on their foot, or a chicken, somehow, escaping into the chaos. Camp also teaches you patience. Hours stretch as soldiers wait for orders, for food, for the next battle. You learn to watch, to listen, to anticipate what might happen next. Gossip spreads faster than wildfire. Someone spotted a noble passing by. Someone got drunk and fell off a wagon. Someone lost their boots in the mud. These small stories keep the camp alive and remind everyone that, even in the worst conditions, life continues. Medical care is minimal. If someone gets injured, a healer, if you're lucky enough to have one, is tasked with cleaning wounds, applying basic salves, and hoping the patient doesn't die from infection. Broken bones might be set with crude splints. Infections are common. You quickly learn that avoiding injury isn't just about fighting skill. It's about awareness, luck, and sometimes pure paranoia. A scrape today could ruin your chances of surviving the next battle. Nighttime in camp is strange. Darkness brings a quiet eeriness, broken only by distant watch calls or the occasional scream of a startled soldier. Fires cast flickering shadows on tents, horses shift and snort, and you realize that even when the battle is over, danger never truly sleeps. Shadows play tricks on your mind. Every rustle of canvas or whisper of wind could be an enemy spy, or just the neighbor snoring. The camp is never completely calm. Animals add to the chaos. Horses bite or kick if startled. Dogs chase rats or run off with scraps. Chickens wander freely, clucking indignantly. Even the occasional pig might cause havoc. You think surviving humans is hard. Try surviving the animals in camp. They teach you caution, timing, and the realization that nothing in a medieval camp is predictable. Entertainment is simple and often strange. Soldiers tell stories of past battles, boast about exaggerated heroics, or gamble with dice. Music might appear, a crude flute, a drum, a lute, but mostly it's just laughter at someone slipping in the mud or joking about the horror of rations. Games are small but vital. They keep morale high, bond soldiers together, and provide a tiny mental escape from the constant stress of survival. Camp life also teaches hierarchy. Orders come from captains or sergeants, and disobedience is rarely tolerated. You quickly learn who's in charge, whose advice matters, and who's just annoying. Respect, fear, and caution guide your interactions. One wrong word, and you might find yourself cleaning weapons for a week or carrying water in the rain while everyone else watches. Understanding the chain of command is as essential as sharpening your sword. And, surprisingly, camp life is educational. You learn about weather patterns, terrain, and survival skills. You notice which areas flood after rain, which paths are safe for horses, which neighbors are reliable in a pinch. You might even pick up basic medical tricks, weapon repair tips, or strategies for avoiding unnecessary injury. The battlefield is brutal, but the camp teaches you how to live another day. By the time morning comes again, camp life has become a rhythm. You've cleaned your weapon, adjusted your armor, eaten something vaguely edible, dodged a few minor injuries, and maybe even laughed. The camp is still chaotic, uncomfortable, and often gross, but it's also your lifeline. Without it, surviving another 24 hours on the battlefield would be nearly impossible. It's the quiet, grim, muddy backstage of war, and it's as essential as courage or skill in combat. So, if you thought the battle itself was hard, wait until you experience life in camp. It's sweaty, smelly, exhausting, and chaotic, but it's also where bonds form, skills are sharpened, and preparation meets survival. Life here isn't glamorous, it isn't comfortable, but it's the difference between making it through the day or becoming just another story in the mud. Camp life is messy, hilarious, and brutal, and in many ways, it's where the true test of surviving a medieval battlefield begins. You think the hardest part of a medieval battlefield is the swords, arrows, or axes. Sure, those are terrifying, but nothing prepares you for the constant, creeping, teeth-clenching terror that is fear itself. Fear is a shadow in the corner of your vision, a tightening in your chest, and a punch to your stomach every time you hear a horn or a distant scream. Adrenaline becomes your closest friend and worst enemy all at once. Morning brings a shaky optimism, but the second you hear the first clash of weapons, fear sneaks in. Your heart races, palms sweat, and every nerve feels electric. Even the bravest soldier, yes, even the ones who brag about conquering entire villages, feels it. Fear isn't just about dying. It's about making mistakes, dropping your weapon, tripping over a comrade, or realizing you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And guess what? You probably are. Adrenaline is the double-edged sword. It heightens your senses. The metallic smell of blood, the flash of a blade, the screaming of horses and men. You notice details that would normally escape you. The subtle slip of an opponent's foot, the angle of a spear, the wobble of a shield. Your body feels faster, stronger, sharper. But here's the catch. Adrenaline also exhausts you. You can run faster than you ever thought possible, swing a sword with terrifying force, and dodge a dozen attacks. But eventually your body screams, stop. And in the middle of a medieval battlefield, stopping often isn't an option. Fear is also contagious. One soldier panics, and suddenly the formation wobbles. A small mistake can cascade into chaos. You see your comrades stumble or fall, hear them cry out, and suddenly your own fear spikes. It's like a living organism, spreading through the ranks, feeding off every mistake, misstep, and shout. And it's hilarious, in a completely horrifying way. Sometimes soldiers scream at things that aren't even there, or flinch at harmless branches. It's terrifying, sure, but if you can laugh a little, you survive longer. Mental preparation is rare. Most soldiers rely on training, instincts, or sheer luck to survive. Some pray, others mutter curses, and a few just close their eyes for a split second and hope they open them again later. Fear teaches humility. It reminds you that no matter how skilled, brave, or armored you are, the battlefield doesn't care about your ego. It will chew you up and spit you out without ceremony. Adrenaline fuels sudden heroics. You see an enemy about to strike a comrade, and your body reacts before your brain catches up. You push, pull, or swing instinctively. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it fails spectacularly. Either way, your fear keeps you alert. You're hyper-aware of sounds, movement, and shadows. Even a gust of wind rustling armor can make your heart leap. You learn quickly that attention isn't optional, it's survival. But here's the funny part. Fear also leads to ridiculous mistakes. Soldiers trip over their own feet, flail wildly, or scream at completely harmless things. Someone might panic, drop their spear, and accidentally stab a horse, or themselves. You can't help but notice the absurdity sometimes. Laughter is rare, but when it comes, it's a fleeting, blessed relief. Even in the middle of life or death moments, humans find a way to inject a little chaos humor. Adrenaline also tricks time. Moments stretch, compress, and twist in ways that feel unnatural. You swing a sword and swear the world slows down. An arrow flies toward you, and for a heartbeat it seems frozen in the air. Then reality snaps back with a horrifying thud. You realize that the battlefield isn't just physical, it's psychological. Every split-second decision matters. Every tiny hesitation could be your last. Fear is relentless. It doesn't sleep, it doesn't rest, and it doesn't take breaks. Even after the first clash, when things seem calmer, your nerves buzz. You hear distant shouting and flinch. The smell of smoke, blood, or manure can trigger panic. Every horn, every shout, every clash of metal brings a fresh jolt of adrenaline. Your body is in overdrive, your mind constantly calculating, your muscles tense and ready. Sleep deprivation and fear mix into a dangerous cocktail. Camp life doesn't offer much rest, and the anticipation of the next clash keeps your mind spinning. You might try to nap, but the fear lingers in your subconscious, twisting dreams into grotesque parodies of reality. You wake up with a start, heart pounding, expecting the battlefield to have moved overnight. This exhaustion wears you down almost as quickly as an enemy's sword. Fear also teaches respect for life, for your comrades, and for your enemies. You quickly learn that the enemy isn't just a person wielding a weapon. They are a force of survival, just like you. One moment of overconfidence, one flash of distraction, and your day ends. You watch others fall and feel a mix of guilt, relief, and anxiety. The battlefield isn't heroic or romantic. It's messy, chaotic, and terrifyingly real. Some soldiers find coping mechanisms: humor, song, muttering prayers, or repeating the same phrase over and over, anything to ground themselves. Others develop strange habits, tapping a shield a certain way, checking a weapon repeatedly, or staring at a point on the horizon as if it will solve everything. These little rituals don't make the fear vanish, but they create a semblance of control in an uncontrollable environment. Adrenaline also sharpens instincts in ways you didn't know were possible. You start noticing patterns, how opponents move, how horses react, even the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You learn to anticipate attacks, to duck, to parry, to survive, not out of bravery, but out of necessity. Fear makes you alive in a way nothing else can. Every sense is heightened, every action deliberate, every choice meaningful. But here's the bitter truth: fear doesn't guarantee survival. Even the most alert, strongest, or clever soldier can fall. Sometimes it's random: a stray arrow, a collapsing wall, a tripping horse. Fear doesn't prevent accidents, but it gives you a fighting chance. It makes you cautious, aware, and sometimes creative in ways that can keep you alive another hour, another minute, another second. Adrenaline fades eventually, leaving exhaustion, aches, and sometimes nausea in its wake. You feel drained, but also strangely alert, aware that surviving 24 hours isn't just about brute strength. It's about mental endurance, focus, and the ability to react under extreme pressure. You realize that surviving isn't glamorous. It's a constant struggle against both the environment and your own instincts. By the end of a day filled with fear and adrenaline, soldiers are a mix of fatigue, relief, and tension. They've faced danger, lived to tell the tale, and learned more about themselves than they ever wanted to know. They've discovered that fear isn't something to eliminate, it's something to channel. Adrenaline isn't just a burst of energy, it's a tool. And surviving a medieval battlefield isn't about being fearless. It's about mastering the chaos within yourself. So, next time you imagine yourself as a brave knight or a daring foot soldier, remember this: fear will never leave you. Adrenaline will push you beyond your limits. And if you can't handle both, you won't survive 24 hours. The battlefield is brutal, but your mind is just as dangerous as any enemy. The key to surviving isn't ignoring the fear. It's letting it sharpen you, focus you, and make you fight harder than you ever thought possible. But here's the bitter truth: fear doesn't guarantee survival. Even the most alert, strongest, or clever soldier can fall. Sometimes it's random: a stray arrow, a collapsing wall, a tripping horse. Fear doesn't prevent accidents, but it gives you a fighting chance. It makes you cautious, aware, and sometimes creative in ways that can keep you alive another hour, another minute, another second. Adrenaline fades eventually, leaving exhaustion, aches, and sometimes nausea in its wake. You feel drained, but also strangely alert, aware that surviving 24 hours isn't just about brute strength. It's about mental endurance, focus, and the ability to react under extreme pressure. You realize that surviving isn't glamorous. It's a constant struggle against both the environment and your own instincts. By the end of a day filled with fear and adrenaline, soldiers are a mix of fatigue, relief, and tension. They've faced danger, lived to tell the tale, and learned more about themselves than they ever wanted to know. They've discovered that fear isn't something to eliminate, it's something to channel. Adrenaline isn't just a burst of energy, it's a tool. And surviving a medieval battlefield isn't about being fearless. It's about mastering the chaos within yourself. So, next time you imagine yourself as a brave knight or a daring foot soldier, remember this: fear will never leave you. Adrenaline will push you beyond your limits. And if you can't handle both, you won't survive 24 hours. The battlefield is brutal, but your mind is just as dangerous as any enemy. The key to surviving isn't ignoring the fear. It's letting it sharpen you, focus you, and make you fight harder than you ever thought possible. Before the clash of swords, before the screams and chaos, comes the formation. The army lines up, and suddenly the battlefield feels like a giant, tense game of human Tetris. You might think it's just a bunch of people standing in rows, but trust me, it's a careful, strategic art, and getting it wrong can be, well, fatal. There are different types of formations, and each has its own quirks, strengths, and weaknesses. You've got your shield walls, where soldiers huddle shoulder to shoulder, overlapping shields like a medieval metal hug. This formation is meant to be nearly impenetrable, but it's also exhausting. You're locked in place, arm aching from holding up a heavy shield, and hoping the guy next to you doesn't drop his. If he does, congratulations, you're suddenly the front line's weak link. Then there's the phalanx, the classic long line of spears sticking out like a porcupine on parade. It's intimidating, yes, but also rigid. You can't really move freely, and if the enemy finds a gap or attacks the sides, it's over. Soldiers joke about it like, hey, I can poke a guy from 10 feet away. Funny until that poke comes back at you with a sword in the gut. Cavalry formations are another story. Horses gallop in neat lines, banners waving, riders shouting orders. It's impressive, until the horses get spooked. A stampede of armored horses is no joke. Suddenly, your perfect charge looks like a medieval rodeo gone wrong. Horses collide, riders fall, and anyone unlucky enough to be underfoot. Well, you get the idea. Adrenaline spikes, screams echo, and the battlefield becomes chaos in slow motion. Commanders are like chess players, trying to anticipate every move. They shout, wave banners, and sometimes use horns or drums to keep the formation in sync. But humans aren't chess pieces. They have nerves, blisters, and lunch regrets. Even the best plan can crumble if someone trips, panics, or gets distracted by a stray chicken wandering near the lines. Yes, chickens on the battlefield were a thing. Don't ask why. It's history. Formations aren't just for attack. They're for defense too. Shield walls protect against arrows, spears, and angry neighbors. Archers stand behind, letting loose volleys of arrows, hoping the enemy doesn't close the gap too fast. You might think hiding behind a wall of shields is safe, but arrows still find gaps. And remember, those arrows hurt, like a lot. One little mistake, one tiny opening, and suddenly you're learning why medieval doctors had a lot of work and very little sleep. The spacing of soldiers is crucial. Too close, and it's suffocating. You can barely swing a sword. Too far, and the enemy finds easy targets. Everyone is constantly adjusting, shuffling, grumbling, and trying not to step on a comrade's toe. It's like a deadly, sweaty dance. And don't forget the mud. Mud turns everything into a slippery nightmare. One misstep, and you're on the ground, helpless, as the world spins around you. Morale is tied closely to formation. If your line holds, everyone feels like a hero. Confidence spreads, but one crack, one breach, and panic travels faster than any horse. Soldiers start retreating, screaming, and sometimes just running blindly into chaos. Maintaining formation isn't just strategy, it's psychology. You gotta trust the person next to you, and trust that your commander's plan won't collapse in the first 5 minutes. Signals are everything. Horns, flags, drum beats. They're the medieval version of text messages, only with higher stakes. Miss a signal, and suddenly you're charging when you shouldn't, or staying put when everyone else is moving. Either way, it ends badly. Some formations rely on pre-battle drills, where soldiers practice moving, shifting, and reacting. It's tedious, sweaty, and sometimes boring, but once the battle starts, those hours of coordination can save lives, or at least prevent a total collapse. Terrain also affects formation. Flat fields are ideal. Hills, rivers, and forests, not so much. A formation can look perfect on paper, but a hidden ditch or muddy patch can ruin everything. Cavalry might stumble, archers can lose footing, and infantry can get stuck trying to navigate around obstacles. Commanders constantly scan, adjust, and curse under their breath. Nature doesn't care about your plan. Flanking maneuvers are both terrifying and brilliant. One moment your shield wall is solid, the next you see movement at the sides. Enemy soldiers trying to sneak around. You scramble, redirect, and try not to panic. Flanking attacks are why you don't want to fight on uneven terrain unless you're ready for chaos. It's also why medieval commanders liked having scouts, people who walk in front of the main army and risk everything to spot potential threats. Spoiler alert, scouts often don't survive. Formations also carry a social hierarchy. Higher-ranking soldiers and knights often stand in more honorable positions, closer to the commander. The peasants and foot soldiers get the roughest spots, frontline, exposed, heavy lifting, and a better chance of being flattened by something heavy. It's like the army's own version of a brutal social ladder. If you're lucky, you survive long enough to be promoted, or at least to brag about not dying in the first hour. Communication is tricky. Shouting orders over the clash of weapons, the screams of men, the neighing of horses, and the thud of arrows hitting shields. Good luck. Miscommunication can break a formation in seconds. A wrong word or misunderstood gesture can turn a carefully arranged wall of protection into chaos. And when that happens, everyone scrambles, trips, swings wildly, and often regrets being alive in the first place. Even with perfect discipline, formations can fail. Weather, mistakes, overconfidence, or sheer luck can collapse the tightest shield wall or the longest spear line. Soldiers adapt on the fly, often improvising, dodging, and hoping the enemy makes the same mistake twice. Survival sometimes depends on creativity as much as training. Despite all this, formations are beautiful in their own chaotic way. Rows of shields, spears thrust forward, archers lined neatly behind. It's a living, breathing machine of human effort. And when it works brilliantly. Soldiers fight as one organism, moving, reacting, surviving. It's mesmerizing. If you ignore the screaming, blood, and smell of mud and horse. So, if you ever imagine yourself charging into battle, remember this. Formations aren't just about standing in neat rows. They're a mix of strategy, discipline, psychology, and luck. They determine life or death, heroism or disaster, survival or instant chaos. And if you can't keep your head, trust your neighbors, and react under pressure, you won't last long. Formations make battles possible, but they're also what make them deadly. One wrong step, one lost shield, one misheard command, and the whole thing collapses like a house of cards. And if you can't handle that, if the chaos, mud, and human unpredictability overwhelm you, then surviving 24 hours on a medieval battlefield, forget it. You wouldn't even make it past the first charge. When the battlefield stretches into a city or fortress, everything changes. Suddenly, it's not just about clashing swords or charging horses. It's about walls, gates, and towers. Welcome to the world of siege tactics, where armies try to break into places designed to keep them out, and defenders try to make you regret even showing up. Sieges could last days, weeks, or even months. Imagine camping outside a fortress with nothing but mud, rats, and the occasional arrow whizzing overhead. Soldiers had to stay alive, stay fed, and somehow stay motivated while staring at walls that seemed impossibly high. It's not just exhausting, it's mentally brutal. You wake up, look at the fortress, and think, yep, still standing. Great. Attackers relied on all sorts of clever, and sometimes ridiculous, tools. Siege towers were basically mobile ladders wrapped in wood, often taller than the city walls, with soldiers ready to storm the top. You'd push this massive contraption forward, hoping it doesn't get stuck in mud, topple over, or get burned by defenders. And if it does, well, goodbye, brave volunteers inside. Some soldiers joked that a siege tower was like a medieval game of Jenga, just with more blood. Battering rams were another classic. A giant log, often capped with metal, swung against gates to break them down. Teams of soldiers pushed it back and forth, grunting and swearing, while arrows rained down from above. It's sweaty, exhausting, and noisy work. One wrong move, and someone's arm or head could get crushed. Fun times. Some rams were covered with leather or hides to protect the soldiers from fire arrows, but that didn't make the job any less terrifying. Catapults and trebuchets added long-range chaos. Stones, fireballs, even dead animals, yes, seriously, could be hurled over walls. The goal? Demoralize defenders, destroy structures, or just gross them out. Imagine trying to eat breakfast while a flaming goat lands nearby. Not fun, and if your aim is off, you might hit your own troops. Siege warfare loved irony, apparently. Defenders had their own tricks. Boiling oil, hot sand, or even quicklime could be poured from walls to fry, burn, or blind attackers. Rocks, arrows, and flaming debris rained down constantly. Climbing the walls wasn't just difficult, it was suicidal. And if you did manage to scale a ladder or siege tower, you'd meet defenders with spears, swords, and rage. One misstep, one slip, and gravity, or a well-aimed axe did the rest. Sieges were as much about psychology as they were about physics. Hunger, fear, and exhaustion were weapons themselves. Attackers tried to cut off supplies, starve the defenders, and force surrender without fighting. Defenders had to ration food, maintain morale, and resist the temptation to run out and die heroically. Both sides were constantly stressed, paranoid, and probably questioning their life choices. Walls weren't just walls, they were layered traps. Arrow slits, murder holes, spikes, and moats all made life miserable for anyone trying to breach them. Siege engineers studied these defenses, trying to find weak points. One poorly placed stone, one miscalculated angle, and the whole plan could collapse. Siege warfare was basically a mix of math, luck, and bravery, or stupidity. Communication in a siege was tricky. Signals had to travel across walls, across moats, and sometimes through smoke and chaos. Misunderstandings could turn a brilliant plan into a disaster. Imagine shouting orders, hoping someone hears, only to find out they ran the wrong way. And in a battle where every second counts, mistakes were deadly. Weather could make or break a siege. Rain turned mud into a sticky nightmare, slowing siege towers and battering rams. Wind could affect trebuchet accuracy. Heat sapped energy and morale. Cold made armor unbearable. Nature didn't care that you were trying to capture a fortress. It just did its thing, and you had to survive it. Living conditions during a siege were, let's say, uncomfortable. Soldiers slept in mud, ate the same meager rations repeatedly, and often dealt with disease. Sanitation was minimal, and boredom was high. Some soldiers tried to sneak into nearby towns to steal food. Others wrote letters home, and a few probably just cried quietly behind the siege engines. Despite all this, everyone had to stay ready for the next push. Sieges often ended in dramatic fashion. A wall could crumble under a ram, a gate could give way after days of pounding, or defenders could surrender after weeks of starvation. But the victory wasn't neat or pretty. It was bloody, exhausting, and chaotic. Even if you survived, you were likely bruised, hungry, and questioning why anyone thought this was a good idea. And sometimes, the siege never ended. There are accounts of campaigns that dragged on for months, with armies stuck in muddy encampments, skirmishing daily, and losing morale gradually. Survival became a game of patience, grit, and luck. You had to balance risk with endurance. Charging the walls too early could kill you. Waiting too long could starve you. There was no easy answer, no cheat code, just the grind of medieval warfare. Interestingly, siege tactics inspired ingenuity. Engineers designed new machines, soldiers improvised, and commanders adapted strategies constantly. It was a deadly arms race of brains and brawn. One clever attack or defense could shift the tide. But even brilliance didn't guarantee survival. You still had to be in the right place at the right time, which again is harder than it sounds when mud, arrows, and chaos are involved. By the time a siege ended, the battlefield looked like a nightmare collage of collapsed walls, shattered machines, and exhausted humans. Survivors counted themselves lucky, nursing wounds and hoping to avoid the next campaign. Siege tactics didn't just test skill, they tested patience, resilience, and sanity. So, if you think you'd make it through a medieval siege, think again. Between the constant threat of death from above, exhaustion, mud, disease, and boredom, it wasn't just a fight. It was a full-body endurance test. Even the cleverest, bravest soldier could falter. One slip, one misjudgment, and the fortress would be the last thing you ever saw. Siege tactics were brilliant, terrifying, and chaotic, all rolled into one. They showed the creativity and brutality of medieval warfare, but they also highlighted how unforgiving survival really was. If you think standing in formation was tough, imagine being stuck outside walls, waiting for days, dodging fire, stones, and arrows. The siege was a test of strategy, skill, and sheer stubbornness. And if you weren't careful, it was your tomb. And that's why, in the grand scheme of surviving a medieval battlefield, sieges were arguably the cruelest challenge. They required patience, discipline, endurance, and nerves of steel. Without those, you wouldn't last long. A few hours? Maybe. A full day? Almost impossible. Surviving a siege was a miracle, and a reminder that medieval warfare was rarely fair, often brutal, and always deadly. Alright, so you've made it onto the battlefield. You've seen the armor, the formations, the yelling, and the chaos, and you're thinking, okay, maybe I can handle this. Spoiler alert, your first injury is coming, and when it does, it's going to be brutal. First off, let's talk about the obvious. Swords, axes, spears, arrows, and basically anything sharp or pointy. These weapons aren't toys. A sword might nick your arm lightly. Sure, you'll bleed a bit and curse loudly, but a misstep and suddenly you've got a deep gash, and things get messy fast. Spears can pierce straight through a body if you're unlucky, and axes? Forget it. They don't just slice, they crush, they tear, and they have zero interest in leaving you looking neat. But not all injuries come from blades. There's also blunt trauma. Maces, hammers, rocks catapulted from a distance, and falling soldiers can break bones, crack skulls, or give you a concussion that makes the world look like it's spinning in slow motion. Sometimes you get hit and don't even realize it until your arm doesn't work or your head starts throbbing like a war drum. And yes, someone will probably step on you while you're down. Welcome to reality. Here's the kicker. Blood is everywhere. And I mean everywhere. There's no antiseptic, no sterile cloths, no magic potion that instantly fixes a cut. A rag, some dirt, and a prayer are your best friends. Infection is the real enemy, lurking quietly in every nick and scrape. A small wound might seem harmless, but leave it untreated, and you're playing Russian roulette with gangrene. Many soldiers died not from the fight itself, but from the bacteria partying inside their wounds. Now let's meet the medieval medics, or, more accurately, the people who sort of try to be medics. Some were monks who had read scroll or two on anatomy. Some were barber surgeons who also cut hair, which honestly sounds worse than it is. Either way, mistakes were common. A bad cut from a saw meant you could lose a limb faster than you could scream. They had herbs, poultices, and prayers. They tried, bless them, but survival was mostly luck. Pain management was questionable. Sure, opiates existed, but dosing was more like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. Often, soldiers just gritted their teeth, clenched their fists, and prayed that the next blow didn't land before the last one healed. Sometimes it did anyway. Amputations were a fact of life. Got your leg crushed, off it goes. Your arm mangled beyond repair, chopped. And don't expect anesthesia. It was saw, blood, screaming, and a whole lot of good luck. Some survived, some didn't. And the ones who did, congratulations, you just joined the club of permanently scarred, slightly unbalanced humans. Then there's disease. Oh, the disease. Medieval armies were floating petri dishes. Dysentery, fevers, infections, gangrene. These were all lurking, waiting to strike. A soldier could survive the chaos of the front line, only to be felled by what was basically a bad stomach bug. And let's not forget lice, fleas, and general filth. Hygiene was a suggestion, not a rule. Morale takes a hit fast. You see your friends cut down, screaming, bleeding, maybe crying for help, and you start questioning your life choices. Panic spreads quicker than the arrows. Soldiers hesitate, some freeze, some run, and some just start mumbling things that would make a monk faint. Psychological trauma was real, and no amount of pep talk could fix it. And don't think you're safe with a small injury. Even minor wounds were a gamble. An arrow nicking your shoulder could turn into a full-blown infection that ruins your mobility. A scraped leg could fester overnight. Every injury carried a silent countdown. Will it kill you? cripple you, or just leave you limping for the rest of your life. You never knew until it was too late. Medieval battlefields weren't just messy. They were loud, chaotic classrooms of suffering. Every soldier learned quickly that even surviving a minor scrape was an accomplishment. You had to be aware. You had to be quick. You had to hope that the medic, or monk, or barber surgeon, or whoever, was in the right place at the right time. And even then, luck mattered more than skill sometimes. The psychological toll was constant. You couldn't ignore the screaming, the blood, the smell of iron and dirt, the sounds of bones snapping. Your brain learned to shut down parts of itself, just to survive another hour. But trauma lingered. Fear, shock, and a creeping sense of mortality were always there, whispering in your ear. Every step could be the one that ends your story. Recovery? Don't count on it being complete. Even if you survived the first day, your body would be scarred, weakened, and vulnerable. You'd return to battle with a limp, a scar, or a missing finger, and every injury added up, making you slower, less steady, more likely to fall next time. Surviving one battle didn't guarantee surviving the next. Hygiene was the worst enemy. Mud, human waste, and contaminated water turned minor wounds into serious threats. Soldiers learned quickly. If you cut yourself, clean as best as you could, and hope for the best. Sometimes the best wasn't good enough. Death came fast for some, slow for others. Some soldiers never knew what hit them. Others lingered in agony, days or weeks, until finally their bodies gave up. And you? You could be anywhere in that spectrum. No one was safe. Everyone was vulnerable. Medieval medicine had its charms, though. Herbs, poultices, and prayers offered some comfort, even if they didn't actually heal much. A little hope went a long way. Sometimes a friendly monk or a skilled barber surgeon could be the difference between life and death. Mostly, though, it was about staying alive long enough for the battle to end, or for reinforcements to arrive. So what's the takeaway? Injuries on a medieval battlefield are inevitable. Even the tiniest scrape could spiral into a nightmare. Survival depended on luck, quick thinking, and sometimes sheer stubbornness. Every wound was a lesson. Stay alert, protect yourself, and maybe, just maybe, don't get hit again. And remember, if you think you'd make it through a medieval battle unscathed, think again. The battlefield isn't just a place for swords and arrows. It's a place where the weak, the unlucky, and the unprepared vanish quickly. Every cut, bruise, broken bone, an infection reminds you how fragile life was back then. So, next time you hear about a knight charging in a battle, just imagine all the ways that day could go wrong. Everything from a splinter in your foot to a misjudged swing that ends your career permanently. The medieval battlefield was as much about surviving injuries as it was about killing your enemies. And honestly, surviving it all, that was already a miracle. So, you've survived the chaos, the blood, the screaming, the injuries, or maybe you're just barely hanging on. But now comes a quieter, sneakier killer, hunger and fatigue. And trust me, these two are brutal in their own special way. They don't slash or stab. They slowly eat away at your strength, your focus, your patience, and sometimes your sanity. Medieval armies didn't have MREs or food trucks. Meals were sporadic, basic, and often disgusting. You get bread if you were lucky, maybe some salted meat, and occasionally cheese. That's it. Sometimes the meat was barely cooked. Sometimes it was a little questionable. And the bread? Often stale, hard enough to break a tooth if you weren't careful. Think of chewing on a brick and you're halfway there. And yes, everyone was hungry all the time. Even the knights in shining armor were constantly gnawing at scraps when they weren't fighting. Now imagine marching in heavy boots, wearing armor that feels like it weighs a ton, swinging a sword and dodging axes, all while your stomach is growling like a feral wolf. Every step becomes a little harder, every swing of your weapon a little slower. Hunger isn't just discomfort, it's a performance killer. You start misjudging distances, underestimating enemy moves, or tripping over your own feet because your body doesn't have the energy it needs to keep up. Fatigue works hand in hand with hunger. Days of marching, training, and fighting without proper rest turn your body into a ticking time bomb. Your legs ache, your arms shake, your head feels heavy, and your eyelids are staging a full rebellion. You think you can push through, but the moment your focus slips, bam, a misstep, a missed block, a lucky swing from the enemy, and suddenly you're on the ground, wondering why you didn't take that nap when you had the chance. Sleep was rare and uncomfortable. Tents were cramped, the ground was hard or muddy, and sometimes you had to keep watching shifts, so the bed you thought you'd get was really just a few hours of dozing while half of you stayed alert. Mosquitoes, lice, the smell of unwashed bodies, mud, and sweat didn't make it any easier. And if it rained, congratulations. Your bed is now a soggy nightmare, and your armor has soaked through, making it heavier than ever. Hunger also messes with your mind. You get cranky. You get paranoid. You start imagining the enemy everywhere, even if it's just a bird. Arguments over scraps of food break out constantly. Someone steals your ration, instant feud, and don't expect much mercy from your captain. You're just another soldier, replaceable, in a long line of hungry, tired humans. Water was a problem too. Clean water? Rare. Rivers and streams could be contaminated. Wells might be guarded or too far away. And sometimes the only water you got was lukewarm and muddy. Dehydration sneaks up on you. At first it's just thirst. Then your muscles cramp. Then your vision blurs. Next thing you know, you're staggering like a drunk, barely able to hold your weapon. And no one is going to carry you off the battlefield if you collapse. They've got their own survival to worry about. Rations were also laughably small. A loaf of bread might be shared among 5 soldiers. Salted meat could be chewed in tiny bites until it's practically powder. And forget variety. Every day is the same. Sometimes it's just flour mixed with water. You eat it because it fills your stomach, but it doesn't exactly make you feel alive. Hunger gnaws at your mood, your energy, and your ability to focus on anything other than food. Let's talk about morale. Hunger and fatigue crush it faster than any sword. Soldiers start fighting not for glory or their kingdom, but to survive. Complaints fly. Mutinies happen, even in small skirmishes. Sleep-deprived, starving men make mistakes. Leaders lose control. Chaos spreads faster than fire. And all of this before the real fighting even begins. Your body literally starts breaking down. Muscles shrink, reflexes slow, and your immune system collapses. Minor cuts fester. A small cold could turn into something deadly. And because everyone is exhausted, mistakes in battle become deadly. Hunger and fatigue aren't just uncomfortable. They're direct threats to your survival. There's also the mental side. When you're tired and starving, your brain doesn't work like normal. You start hallucinating, imagining things that aren't there, hearing sounds that don't exist. You misremember commands, forget battle plans, and maybe even swing your sword at your own shadow. Battlefields were as much about mental endurance as physical. One wrong step, one lapse in judgment, and it's over. Training barely helps. You could be the strongest, fastest, smartest soldier in your unit, but hunger and fatigue don't care. Even the most experienced knight, at the end of a long march with little food or sleep, becomes clumsy, slow, and vulnerable. Survival becomes a game of who can push just a little further, hold out just a little longer. Interestingly, some medieval armies try to mitigate this. They sent cooks ahead, rationed supplies carefully, or tried to rest at night. But let's be real, war isn't predictable. Supplies run low, weather ruins crops, and chaos doesn't respect schedules. Even the best prepared soldiers often ended up starving, exhausted, and miserable. Humor helps. Soldiers joked about their stomachs, their blisters, their lack of sleep. If I survive the hunger today, I'll eat a whole cow tomorrow, they might say, even though the cow was probably just another loaf of stale bread. Humor was a coping mechanism, a small rebellion against the miserable reality of medieval campaigning. So, if you think you'd survive a day or a week on a medieval battlefield without proper food and sleep, think again. Hunger and fatigue are silent assassins. They sneak up on you, weaken you, cloud your judgment, and make every other danger 10 times worse. A soldier could survive an arrow, a sword swing, and even a falling tree, but a hungry, exhausted body? That's a far tougher opponent. In short, the battlefield isn't just about fighting your enemy. It's about fighting your own body and mind. Every hour, every step, every swing of your weapon takes more energy than you might have. And the lack of food and rest makes everything exponentially harder. Even the bravest, strongest, most skilled soldier finds themselves breaking down under the pressure. So next time you think you'd last 24 hours on a medieval battlefield, picture this. The sun is rising, you're exhausted from marching, your stomach is growling, your muscles ache, your head is pounding, and you still have hours of combat ahead. Your energy is draining fast, your focus is slipping, and every decision could be your last. Hunger and fatigue aren't glamorous. They aren't exciting, but they're deadly. And surviving them, that's the first victory on any medieval battlefield. Alright, you think surviving the battlefield is all about swinging swords, dodging arrows, and staring down your enemy? Think again. There's another layer, one that doesn't always get the glory, but without it, you're basically walking into a death trap. I'm talking about scouts and spies. These are the shadow players, the quiet movers who see the battlefield in ways the rest of the army can't. And if you've ever wondered why some soldiers survived while others didn't, a lot of it comes down to these guys. Scouts were the eyes and ears of the army. They'd sneak ahead of the main force, often moving through mud, forests, hills, or rivers, all while keeping as quiet as a cat stalking a mouse. And yes, sometimes they were literally cats. Okay, maybe not, but you get the picture. Their job was to spot enemy positions, identify weak points, and sometimes just figure out if the enemy was awake or still snoring in their tents. One wrong step, a twig snapping, a miscalculated shadow, or a suspicious crow, and you're dead. Or worse, captured. And in the Middle Ages, being captured didn't usually mean polite questions and tea. It meant ransom, torture, or becoming part of some horrible morale story the enemy would tell. Scouts had to know the land intimately. Hills, rivers, woods, and roads, all of it mattered. They memorized every creek, every thicket, every hiding spot. Imagine crawling through mud at 3 a.m., armor scratched, boots full of water, stomach growling, and eyes straining in the dark to spot a patrol of enemy soldiers. One small slip could blow the whole plan, and the enemy often had their own scouts, meaning it was a game of hide and seek where losing meant more than embarrassment. It meant death. Spies, on the other hand, worked differently. Sometimes they were civilians, sometimes soldiers disguised as peasants or even enemy troops. Their goal: gather intel, spread misinformation, and sabotage wherever possible. Picture a spy mingling in a crowded market, listening to conversations, slipping notes into pockets, or quietly cutting a rope here and there. One misstep, one suspicious glance, and suddenly they're dangling from a tree or thrown in a dungeon. Humor might exist in stories, but in real life, it was a tightrope with no net. The relationship between scouts, spies, and the main army was tense. A good scout could save thousands of lives by spotting ambushes or finding the fastest route around a river. A bad report, thousands of soldiers could march blindly into disaster. Imagine being in the main force, waiting for word from scout, pacing back and forth, wondering if your fate is already sealed just because someone tripped over a route while spying. And that uncertainty, that gnaws at morale like a rat chewing on cheese. Scouts often traveled light. No heavy armor, no big shields, just weapons that wouldn't slow them down. Daggers, short swords, maybe a bow. Every ounce mattered, and every sound mattered. The snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves, the hoot of an owl. It could be the difference between life and death. Fatigue hit them harder in some ways. They couldn't stop. They couldn't rest much. One moment of hesitation, and you're either caught or you failed your comrades. Spies had their own tricks. Disguises, false papers, secret signals, coded messages. Basically, the medieval version of a high-stakes puzzle. They had to read the enemy, anticipate plans, and often act like the enemy's friend. The pressure? Insane. If caught, their brains had to be quick enough to invent lies that wouldn't blow their cover, even as the guards poked, prodded, or threatened. One wrong answer, and their luck ran out. No rescue missions, no backup plan. Even within your own army, scouts and spies weren't always trusted. Soldiers might think you were exaggerating, misreporting, or, heaven forbid, being a double agent. You had to be convincing, precise, and fast. Imagine giving a warning about enemy reinforcements, only for the commander to shrug and say, "Yeah, right, sure, we've got this." That doubt could be deadly when the main force charged blindly into the enemy's trap. Scouts and spies often face psychological strain too. Alone for hours, sometimes days, moving quietly through unknown territory, listening for danger that could be anywhere. They had to stay alert constantly. Sleep was minimal. Hunger was constant. Fatigue was intense. And all the while, they had to keep their nerves in check. One twitch of the wrong muscle, one misstep, one whisper too loud, and it could be over. And if you think it's just physical danger, think again. The mind starts playing tricks. Shadows turn into enemy soldiers. Rustling leaves are whispers plotting your death. Your imagination becomes the enemy, and it's relentless. The stakes weren't always obvious to the average soldier either. You might be in the ranks, wondering why you're marching through a dense forest, or why your captain suddenly changes direction. That's the scout's report at work, shaping the movement of thousands without the general army ever seeing the scout. It's invisible work, but it saves lives, or ends them if it fails. And sometimes, that failure is just a small misread signal, a forgotten path, or a miscount of enemy forces. Small mistakes are amplified in war. Humor existed, but it was rare. A scout might joke about how many times they've slipped in the mud or how the enemy's tent smells worse than the battlefield. Spies might laugh at their ridiculous disguises or the absurdity of pretending to be someone they're not. But the laughter was brief and quiet. One false move, one loud laugh in the wrong place, and it's over. So, if you think you could be a scout or a spy in the medieval world, picture this. You're crawling through mud in the dark, eyes straining, ears tuned to every sound. You've had no food, barely any sleep, and you can't afford a single mistake. Every tree, every shadow, every sound could be a threat. Every report you give could change the fate of thousands. And all this work, invisible. You might save countless lives, but no one claps for you. You just move on to the next mission, the next day, the next danger. In the end, scouts and spies were the unsung heroes of the battlefield. They were fast, cunning, and insanely brave, or maybe just insanely stubborn. They survived by knowing when to move, when to hide, and when to act. They survived by being clever, alert, and willing to risk everything in silence. Without them, armies marched blind. Without them, victory was a guessing game. Without them, you would definitely not survive 24 hours on a medieval battlefield. Now, let's talk about something that really separates the warriors from the walking corpses. Morale. Yeah, morale. The mental armor that either keeps you swinging your sword or makes you bolt screaming in the other direction. On a medieval battlefield, it wasn't just about skill with a sword or sturdiness of armor. Half the battle was staying sane when everything around you smells like mud, blood, and panic. Imagine waking up at dawn, boots soaked from marching all night, stomach growling because the army rationed you about a bite of stale bread and some water, and someone yells, "The enemy is right over that hill." Your hands shake, your knees wobble, and you wonder, not for the first time, why on earth you signed up. That's where morale comes in. It's the invisible glue holding the chaos together. A soldier with good morale might charge bravely, shout orders, and even crack a joke while dodging arrows. A soldier with bad morale, they're already thinking about how nice it would be to be home in their bed, or under it. Morale was fragile. It could be boosted by a charismatic leader waving a flag, bellowing a speech, or promising glory, or crushed by seeing a friend fall, realizing the enemy vastly outnumbers you, or just smelling that awful mix of death and mud that never seems to go away. A single rumor could swing the mood of an entire company. They're bringing in more men, or our food has been poisoned. And suddenly, the army isn't just tired, it's panicked. And panic spreads faster than any arrow could fly. Desertion was the natural result when morale crumbled. And yeah, soldiers deserted, even in times when loyalty was expected like it was some sacred duty. Running away wasn't always cowardice, it was survival. Sometimes it was because your stomach was empty, your legs tired, your mind terrified. Other times, it was because the battle seemed hopeless, and living another day seemed more important than dying for someone else's flag. Desertion wasn't pretty. If caught, the punishment could be severe: public shaming, whipping, or even execution. But when the fear hits, rules fly out the window. You're human. You want to live. Fear was contagious. One soldier screaming in terror could start a chain reaction that spread like wildfire. Imagine the chaos. Arrows whizzing, horses panicking, the enemy yelling, and suddenly a chunk of your own side is running. Commanders try to control it, rallying their troops, sounding horns, waving banners. But sometimes it was like trying to stop a river with a stick. Those who stayed often had to trudge through chaos, dodging both enemy attacks and their own fleeing comrades. Survival meant staying level-headed when everyone else lost it. Humor helped, oddly enough. Even in the worst conditions, soldiers found ways to laugh. Maybe it was a crude joke whispered behind shields, a nicked boot that made someone trip, or a comrade's ridiculous helmet slipping over their eyes. Laughing in fear doesn't make the danger go away, but makes it slightly more bearable. It reminds you that, yes, things suck, but hey, you're still alive for now. Commanders understood morale like any good strategist. They would mix fear and hope carefully. A speech here, a visible execution there, A heroic deed broadcast to the ranks. Manipulate morale, and you can make ordinary men into killers or pariahs. And in the middle of the mud, blood, and screaming, soldiers internalized it. You fight because of loyalty, glory, fear, or just because someone bigger and louder than you told you to. The reasons don't matter as long as you keep swinging that sword. Supplies and comfort also affected morale. Tired, hungry soldiers are miserable soldiers. If the food runs out or water becomes scarce, complaints grow, whispers of desertion spread, and the chain of command is strained. Picture trudging through knee-deep mud, shield scraping against a helmet, stomach gnawing, and a friend mutters, "We're done here. Let's go home." That thought infects everyone nearby. One idea, one suggestion, and suddenly the army's backbone is crumbling. Letters and news from home played a subtle role too. A message from a loved one could boost morale, even a little. A reminder that life exists beyond the battlefield. Or, worse, news of death, famine, or betrayal could sink a soldier into despair. Morale wasn't just about the immediate battlefield. It was about the bigger picture, the hope, or hopelessness, of surviving another day. Desertion often happened in small groups rather than solo. Soldiers stuck together, deciding collectively to slip away at night, ducking behind hills or blending into villages. Some were lucky and made it home, though many were caught. And when deserters were caught, their peers witnessed harsh punishment, which sent a clear message. Loyalty equals survival. Betrayal equals suffering. Morale was tricky like that. It needed to be high enough to fight, but scared enough to stay, or else chaos ruled. Battles were psychological games as much as physical ones. The enemy would sometimes stage false retreats, ambushes, or feints to test morale. If your soldiers panic and flee, victory is theirs without a single sword being swung. Maintaining morale meant recognizing these tactics and keeping the soldiers focused. A well-timed joke, a clap on the back, or a motivational speech could stop panic in its tracks. It was a delicate balance, and failure meant total collapse. Fear and courage often mixed in unpredictable ways. Some soldiers were terrified, but kept fighting out of stubbornness, duty, or sheer adrenaline. Others were brave, but went home early because exhaustion or hunger broke their resolve. One soldier might laugh nervously while dodging arrows. Another might scream at a shadow, thinking it's the enemy. Morale dictated which version survived. And spoiler alert, the scared yet alert soldier often had the better shot at living through the day. In essence, morale was invisible armor. You could have the best weapons, strongest shield, and sharpest sword, but if your morale broke, you were as good as dead. Desertion was the natural consequence of failing to maintain that mental armor. And keeping morale up wasn't just about shouting orders. It was about psychology, leadership, small comforts, and the ability to laugh when the world is literally on fire. So, if you think you could survive 24 hours on a medieval battlefield, remember this. Even if you dodge the swords, arrows, and catapults, if your mind cracks, if fear overtakes hope, if hunger and exhaustion overwhelm you, you're done. Morale is everything. Keep it up, or you'll be the one running in the mud with deserters, praying that maybe, just maybe, you make it out alive. Because, in the end, surviving a battlefield isn't just about muscles and armor. It's about keeping your head when everything around you screams for you to lose it. It's about laughing when you shouldn't, trusting when you fear betrayal, and staying put when your instincts scream to run. And if you can't do that, well, you definitely wouldn't survive 24 hours on a medieval battlefield. Alright, so the battle is over. The swords have been sheathed, arrows stuck in trees, and the screams finally fade into an eerie, tense silence. But don't get it twisted. Just because the fighting stops doesn't mean survival is over. No, the aftermath is another battlefield in itself, and it's every bit as messy, terrifying, and chaotic as the fight itself. Step 1. Take in the scene. Bodies litter the ground, some still twitching, some already cold. Horses are down too, tangled in their harnesses or moaning softly, and everywhere there's blood. On dirt, on armor, on what was once a perfectly nice cloak. You might think, wow, I survived, but now reality hits. You're surrounded by chaos, and every sound, a groan, a whistle of wind through armor, a sudden clatter, can spike your heart rate like the first arrow of the day. Then there's the smell. Oh, the smell. It's a mix of iron, sweat, mud, and smoke, with a hint of rot starting to creep in. Even the toughest soldiers gagged at it. Some called it the battle perfume, though I'm pretty sure that's sarcasm. Breathing in deeply is optional, but not recommended. Your nose isn't just complaining. It's warning you that danger lingers, that infection is everywhere, and that every step could be over something sharp or gross. Survivors move cautiously. Some are helping the wounded, dragging comrades, binding limbs with scraps of cloth, whispering reassurances. Others are scavenging. This isn't looting in a villainous sense. It's survival. If someone dropped a sword, a shield, or even a piece of armor, you grab it. You check the bodies for coins, food, or water. Every little advantage could make the difference between getting out alive and becoming another body in the dirt. The dead are a grim reminder that survival isn't guaranteed. And honestly, seeing a friend fall can mess with your head more than any arrow ever could. Soldiers often froze, staring at the lifeless forms, muttering prayers, or blaming themselves. Some tried to laugh it off, a nervous attempt to reclaim some sense of control, while others wept quietly. Morale, even after surviving, is fragile. You survived physically, but mentally? That's another battlefield entirely. Cleanup begins slowly, often reluctantly. Commanders order bodies to be moved to prevent disease, though it's rarely fast or thorough. The wounded are tended to by medics or fellow soldiers, if any are left. And yes, death is a constant companion in this stage. Even after surviving the initial fight, many soldiers didn't make it through the night due to infection, wounds, or exhaustion. Surviving a battle isn't just about avoiding swords. It's about avoiding what comes after. Scavengers and looters, sometimes friendly, sometimes enemy, start to appear. Villagers might creep in, curious or desperate, looking for food, supplies, or coins. And the battlefield becomes a strange mix of quiet mourning, frantic activity, and opportunistic survival. You have to keep your wits about you, because someone desperate enough might take your pack, your weapon, or even attack you just to live another day. Corpses attract predators. Birds of prey, wolves, and stray dogs pick their way through the dead, and the survivors have to dodge them, too. A crow landing on a shield might make you jump, because your brain hasn't fully recalibrated to the post-battle world. Everything is heightened. The sense of danger doesn't stop because the fighting does. Your adrenaline is still surging, and every step through mud and bodies is tense. The wounded face their own challenges. A shallow wound might fester into a deadly infection without proper care. Broken bones go untreated, making simple movement agony. And yet, despite the pain, soldiers find ways to laugh at small absurdities. A helmet sitting crookedly on a head, a horse snoring in the middle of a pile of debris, just to keep their mind from slipping into despair. Humor, once again, is survival. Commanders must assess the aftermath: who survived, who is fit to march, and who needs medical attention. They count losses, evaluate weapons, and plan the next steps. The soldiers themselves are exhausted, muddy, and traumatized, but orders still need to be followed. Survival now depends on discipline and organization, even if half the army is feeling like walking corpses. Food and water are scarce. Soldiers are dehydrated, hungry, and sunburned or freezing, depending on the season. Every sip of water feels like gold. Every bit of bread is cherished. And if the enemy is still nearby, forget about comfort. Stay alert. You might have survived the main fight, but survival now is about moving carefully, tending to wounds, and staying ready for a counterattack. Psychologically, the aftermath is brutal. Even the bravest soldiers experienced a mental battle with panic, grief, and exhaustion. Some sang or told stories to keep spirits up. Others muttered curses at fate, the enemy, or their own luck. The battlefield isn't just dirt and bodies. It's a place where memories of death and fear linger long after the swords are gone. Nightfall doesn't bring peace. Darkness can hide enemies, wild animals, or treacherous terrain. Fires are lit to keep warm and to cook meager rations, but the flickering flames cast shadows over the dead and dying, a constant reminder of what just happened. Survivors huddle together, sharing blankets, water, and silence, each soldier lost in their own thoughts, each wondering if they'll make it to morning. Recovery is slow. After the battle, soldiers often march again, either to claim victory, retreat, or regroup. The body count, the mud, the exhaustion, they all carry forward. Those who survive become hardened, but also wary. Every battle teaches harsh lessons, and the aftermath is a brutal teacher. It's not just about skill in combat. It's about endurance, resourcefulness, and mental toughness. And finally, remember this: surviving the aftermath doesn't feel heroic. It feels grim, exhausting, and sometimes pointless. But it's necessary. If you can get through this stage, you can maybe, just maybe, live to see another battle, another dawn, and another chance to laugh, complain, and fight again. So next time you imagine a medieval battlefield, don't just picture the clash of swords. Picture the mud, the blood, the groaning, the scavenging, the exhausted survivors trying to drag themselves and their friends out alive. That's the real story. Surviving the fight isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new kind of chaos. And if you think you can make it through all of that without gagging, tripping, or screaming, well, you be one tough human. Because the aftermath teaches the final, hard lesson. Survival doesn't end when the fighting stops. It continues with every breath, every step, every careful motion across the ground that has just been soaked in blood, sweat, and mud. And if you can't handle that, well, you definitely wouldn't last 24 hours on a medieval battlefield.